The bonding chamber fell completely silent. No one moved, no one breathed. Even the massive alien warlords standing around the arena looked frozen in disbelief. Because every single cub had ignored the warriors and chosen the human instead. The cubs were never supposed to choose him. That was the entire problem. Humanity had only recently joined the Galactic Accord, and most species still viewed humans as unpredictable emotional disasters, barely advanced enough for interstellar diplomacy. Too impulsive, too reckless, too attached. Especially according to the Varkari. The Varkari were one of the oldest warrior civilizations in known space. Towering predator-like beings covered in dark armored scales, glowing amber eyes, and ceremonial battle markings, carved directly into their armor plates. Everything about Varkari culture revolved around strength, discipline, combat, honor. Even their children followed ancient traditions. Every Varkari cub eventually bonded with a guardian warrior during a sacred ceremony known as the choosing. The bond shaped the cub's future permanently. Warriors trained them, protected them, raised them into future protectors of the empire. The ceremony mattered more than politics, more than status, more than bloodlines. And absolutely nobody, not one in recorded history, expected the cubs to choose an outsider, especially not a human maintenance worker named Elias Ward. Elias wasn't supposed to be inside the bonding arena. Technically, but that sentence described most of his life. At 27 years old, Elias worked aboard Citadel Station Orpheus, repairing environmental systems, damaged transport rails, and occasionally saving entire sections of the station using deeply questionable engineering methods. Officially, he held the title of Senior Maintenance Specialist. Unofficially, he was the reason half the station still functioned, mostly because he fixed problems faster than regulations could stop him. The Varkari tolerated him because he worked hard and rarely acted intimidated around them, which made him unusual already. Most species feared Varkari warriors instinctively. Elias mostly complained about how much space they occupied in hallways. "They're enormous," he muttered constantly. "You people evolved specifically to block doorways?" One Varkari commander actually laughed hearing that, which shocked everyone nearby. The day everything changed began with a broken thermal regulator. Naturally, one of the environmental systems beneath the bonding arena malfunctioned hours before the sacred ceremony, causing dangerous temperature instability throughout the incubation chambers. Varkari cubs required carefully controlled atmospheric conditions during early bonding cycles. If temperatures shifted too quickly, the cubs could become stressed, aggressive, even sick. Panic spread quickly among the caretakers. The ceremony involved 12 royal cubs from major warrior bloodlines. Delaying the choosing would insult dozens of powerful clans simultaneously. No. Naturally, someone called Elias, because disasters apparently followed him professionally. When his Elias arrived beneath the arena, chaos already filled the maintenance corridors. Technicians argued loudly. Warden sirens flashed overhead. Several warriors looked seconds away from threatening somebody with ceremonial blades. Elias took one glance at the smoking thermal system and sighed deeply. "Yeah, that's bad." One technician snapped immediately. "Can you repair it or not?" Elias crouched beside the damaged regulator calmly. "Probably. You said that last time before half the water systems exploded." In my defense, Elias cried seriously, they exploded correctly. Nobody knew how to answer that. The repairs took hours. The entire time, Varkari cubs remained inside temporary holding chambers above the arena, waiting for the ceremony to begin. Normally, cubs stayed calm before the choosing. Today? Not even close. The temperature instability stressed them badly. Handlers struggled constantly. Several cubs hissed aggressively. Others refused food entirely. One even bit a caretaker, hard enough to crack armor plating. The warriors grew increasingly nervous, because Varkari cubs rarely lost control like this. Especially royal cubs. Meanwhile, Elias crawled halfway inside a burning thermal conduit, trying not to electrocute himself. Agon. By the time he restored the regulator system, the ceremony had already been delayed nearly 3 hours. The arena atmosphere felt tense enough to start wars accidentally. Hundreds of Varkari warriors gathered around the sacred bonding grounds, while clan leaders watched from elevated platforms, silently judging everyone. At the center stood 12 cubs. Small compared to adults, but still intimidating by most species standards. Dark-scaled bodies, sharp claws, bright glowing eyes scanning constantly across the arena. Each cub wore ceremonial silver markings representing their bloodline, and every one of them looked deeply unhappy. Elias should have left immediately after repairs. Instead, he stayed. Mostly because he wanted to confirm the thermal systems remained stable. Definitely not because the cubs looked adorable. Absolutely not. The ceremony began traditionally. Warriors entered the arena one by one, while the cubs evaluated them instinctively. Varkari bonding relied on ancient biological responses nobody fully understood. The cubs simply chose. Usually through immediate emotional recognition. A future guardian, a protector, a partner. The first warrior approached confidently. One cub hissed directly in his face. Awkward. The second warrior tried next. Another cub turned away immediately. Murmurs spread across the arena. Something felt wrong. More warriors entered. More rejections followed. The cubs grew increasingly agitated instead of calmer. One caretaker whispered nervously, "This has never happened before." Even the elder clan leaders looked unsettled now. Then suddenly, one cub looked toward the maintenance balcony above the arena, toward Elias, and froze. The tiny creature tilted its head curiously. Then another cub noticed him too. Then another, within seconds. Every single cub stared directly at the human. Elias blinked slowly. "Why are they looking at me?" Nobody answered, mostly because nobody knew. The nearest cub suddenly made a soft chirping sound, then bounded directly across the arena, straight toward Elias. The crowd gasped collectively. A caretaker reached instinctively to stop it. Too late, the cub sprinted past every warrior in the chamber, before skidding to a stop directly beside the confused human. Then sat down. Like it belonged there. Silence consumed the arena. Subalot silence. Elias looked down nervously. The cub nudged against his boot gently. Then another cub ran toward him. Then another, and another. Within moments, all 12 royal cubs surrounded Elias completely. One climbed directly into his lap. Another curled against his leg. A third aggressively hissed at anyone approaching too closely. The entire Varkari leadership stared in horrified disbelief. Because this wasn't random curiosity. This was bonding behavior, sacred bonding behavior, with a human. One elder warrior finally spoke. "Impossible." Elias raised one hand awkwardly while surrounded by alien cubs. "Good news," he said carefully. "I also have no idea what's happening." The arena exploded into chaos afterward. Clan leaders argued furiously. Caretakers panicked. Several warriors demanded immediate separation protocols. Others looked too stunned to speak at all. Meanwhile, the cubs refused to leave Elias, at all. Every attempt to separate them ended badly. The cubs became distressed instantly. Acris. Protective. One nearly bit a commander attempting removal. Another climbed onto Elias's shoulders and refused to move entirely, which became difficult because Varkari cubs weighed significantly more than human children. Elias nearly collapsed. "Okay," he groaned. "You are much heavier than you look." The cub purred loudly. Several warriors looked emotionally devastated hearing that sound. Because Varkari cubs only purred around bonded guardians. Commander Thalik arrived shortly afterward. And if ordinary Varkari looked intimidating, Thalik looked like war itself learned to walk upright. Massive scarred armor covered his body, while ceremonial blades rested across his back. Entire pirate fleets surrendered at his approach. He stared silently at Elias surrounded by cubs, then finally asked, "What did you do?" Elias looked genuinely helpless. "I fixed an air conditioner." "That cannot possibly be the explanation." "Honestly, I agree." But later that evening, one elderly caretaker quietly discovered the truth. Or at least part of it. She reviewed security recordings from earlier that day carefully, specifically the hours before the ceremony began. Then she noticed something extraordinary. While warriors prepared for the choosing, Elias unknowingly spent hours near the cub holding chambers repairing thermal systems. And during those hours, he talked constantly. Not to the cubs directly, mostly to himself. Complaining about broken machinery, making terrible jokes, singeing badly while working. The cubs listened the entire time. More importantly, when the temperature systems failed and panic spread through the chambers, Elias remained calm, steady, relaxed. The cubs associated his voice with safety before the ceremony ever began. And unlike the tense warriors surrounding them, the human never treated them like future weapons. He treated them like children. That changed everything. Commander Thalik confronted Elias privately afterward. The cubs still refused to leave the human completely, forcing several awkward compromises involving temporary, living quarters. One cub slept directly on Elias's bed. Another destroyed 2 pillows proudly. Elias was losing control of his life rapidly. "You are," Thalik said carefully. "Correct. You do not understand our traditions." "Also correct." The commander studied the human silently. "Then, why do the cubs trust you?" Elias hesitated, then answered honestly. "I think they were scared." Thalik frowned slightly. "And?" "I didn't want them to feel alone." Silence followed, because among Varkari, strength usually meant dominance, fearlessness, power. But humans understood another kind of strength entirely. Gentleness, patience, safety, the things frightened children needed most, even alien ones. Over the following weeks, something incredible happened aboard Citadel Station Orpheus. The cubs changed. They became calmer, friendlier, more social. Aggression incidents dropped nearly 80%. Training responses improved dramatically. Medical stress indicators stabilized completely. And somehow, Elias handled all 12 cubs simultaneously despite possessing absolutely no qualifications whatsoever. His apartment became chaos. Tiny claw marks covered furniture. Half his tools disappeared mysteriously. One cub learned how to open refrigeration units and caused 3 separate food theft incidents. Another followed him through maintenance tunnels, constantly carrying random objects, proudly in its mouth. Elias stopped questioning reality eventually. It felt easier. But not everyone approved. Several Varkari clan leaders viewed the bonding as humiliation, a sacred tradition disrupted by an outsider species. Some demanded the cubs be reassigned forcibly. Commander Thalik refused every request, because, secretly, even the warriors saw the truth now. The cubs weren't weak around Elias. They were thriving. One evening, Thalik visited the human quarters unexpectedly. He found Elias asleep on the floor, surrounded by exhausted cubs, curled against him in a massive pile of scales and blankets. The human looked utterly defeated. One cub snored loudly against his chest, another used his arm as a pillow. Thalik stood silently for several moments, then quietly asked, "Why do you tolerate this chaos?" Elias opened one eye tiredly. "They trust me, as simple as that?" Elias looked around at the sleeping cubs softly. "Yeah." The commander remained silent a while longer. Then finally, very quietly, he said something no Varkari leader had spoken publicly before. "You may not understand our traditions, human." Elias blinked sleepily. "But perhaps," Thalik admitted, "our traditions needed to understand you." Years later, the story spread across the galaxy. The Day 12 Varkari cubs rejected legendary warriors and chose one exhausted human maintenance worker instead. Some called it impossible, others called it embarrassing. But the Varkari cubs themselves? They grew into some of the greatest protectors their civilization ever produced. Not because they learned fear, not because they learned dominance, but because a human accidentally taught them something stronger. That true guardianship wasn't about commanding others. It was about making others feel safe. And somehow, that lesson changed an empire forever.